Hi everybody, it's Mike here from AV Invasion. I'm back with another video. Sorry it's been a while since my last one. I've been going out of town with my band. We've been having shows, and it's been a little bit crazy, so I'm back to do this follow-up to the first video I did with this 12 movie scenes that messed me up as a kid. A lot of people like that one, which is exciting. So I thought I would do this follow-up because I kept thinking of more scenes that just got to me at a young age. By the way, this list is not about how it affects me now when I look back on those scenes. It's about how it impacted me when I was a kid. So let's start with number 12. This one creeped me out and it scared me for a long time because after seeing this, I was afraid to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I'll explain more in a second. So number 12 is from Ghostbusters, which came out in 1984, and specifically it was the ghost librarian scene. I watched the clip recently and I'm like, you know, it's still pretty scary, but man, did it traumatize me when I was in the movie theater watching it. You know, the screen is so huge and the sounds are so big that it really makes an impact on your nervous system. They also did a great job making the ghost look very realistic from what I thought a ghost would look like. Just the way she's floating there and just kind of keeping to herself, which is interesting. They approached the ghost. It wasn't the other way around. And just the way the librarian was like, shh, shh, because they were making noise. They were trying to approach her, you know. And so it was really a cool build-up. And then when she finally had enough and unleashed holy hell on them, it was quite the scene.
Get her!
Now, like a lot of movies I saw, I took a lot of it home with me. So I recall that night going to the bathroom, and we had this white shower curtain, and it was pushed all the way to the side. So as I'm going to the bathroom in the middle of the night as a kid, all I could see out of the peripheral vision was something that looked like that librarian ghost. But what saved me is I kept thinking, as long as I don't disturb her, if that's the ghost, as long as I don't disturb her, I should be okay. I had to include number 11 in this list just because of the sheer mass of people that went through the trauma of this scene. And that's from the NeverEnding Story from 1984. I realized a lot of movies on this list are from 1984. It was a magical year for film. You probably know the scene, even though there are a lot of freaky scenes in this movie. It's the one where Artax will not come out of the damn swamp of sadness. Now, at the time in the movie theater, we're all yelling, just try, just get out, you know, just start moving, you can get out of this. Just like Atreyu was trying to get him to do. But he wouldn't even try, and that was the scariest and saddest part to me. And as I got older, it really started to set in how real that scene is in a way. So if you've ever been through depression or you've been close to somebody who's going through that, it really just feels like you have no energy and you can't even get out of bed sometimes. And not only is that terrifying if you're the one going through that, but if somebody you love is going through that and you can't do anything about it, just like Atreyu is just helpless and hopeless to the situation. Number 10 is a scene that was so well made that it stood the test of time and it still lives rent-free in a lot of our brains. And that's the head explosion scene in Scanners from 1981. Such a crazy thing to see at a young age, and even the other day when I rewatched it, it gave me pause, which is kind of a funny word to use to explain it, because when we were kids, we rented the movie and when it got to that particular scene, we would pause it and slowly, incrementally move it forward. It was our version of slow motion back then on a VCR, and we would watch it all happen, you know, step by step, frame by frame. The thing about Scanners, it's not just the visuals that you see that freak you out, it's the sound, you know, that frequency and then the head just exploding. There were just certain movies back then that had covers, like VHS covers, that really stood out to you, and you knew you either had to avoid it or you had to watch it. Scanners kind of blurred the line between the two worlds because I was afraid of it. That's a freaky cover. But also it intrigued me to want to see what it was all about. So hats off to the effects team for pulling off that mind-blowing effect. Pardon the pun. So senseless killing in a sociopathic way really freaks me out. And this occurs in 1984's Toxic Avenger. One of my favorite movies now, But when I was a kid watching it, man, did it wreck me. Our stepdad was really into B movies, so way back when we were really young, we would go to Video Update, and he would choose very strange movies we would have never seen if it wasn't for him. Movies like Mondo Magic and what else? Class of Nukem High, those kind of things. He was really into those B movies. And another one I'll talk about later on in this list. So the reason the Toxic Avenger freaked me out so much is because of the kid on a bicycle scene. So he's being chased by this car full of bullies, you know, these jock-looking dudes with their girlfriends in the car as well. So right away, I could kind of feel a little bit of panic inside because at my school, we had a lot of bullies and they had that same sort of energy. They were the kind of people that would go cruising at night in a hot rod looking for trouble. Well, not only was it bad that they ran the kid down, so the kid on the bike basically just, you know, fell over. They could have just taken off and that would have been the end of that. But instead, they went the next level and then like 1,000 levels above that. They put it in reverse and the kid's laying on the ground and they back over and crush his head. The whole time they're laughing. It's like they're having the time of their lives. And then one thing I will never forget is how the girls jumped out of the car and they were so giddy and excited. And I couldn't believe what I just witnessed, you know, this kid's head getting crushed. And then the girls are taking a picture of it with a Polaroid camera. Well, that really shook me to the core. You know, I went to bed that night and all I could do was replay that scene in my head. It was rough. Number 8 is The Wrath of Khan from 1982. And I recall this being on our TV a lot. We had a channel called Spectrum, and it was either being played on that or they would play it on national TV every once in a while. But it was the ear scene is what I call it. All I could think of as a kid watching this was, why is the guy from Fantasy Island suddenly so evil? And why is he putting those slug-like things in these people's ears? What a jerk. The whole scene's pretty ghastly. So you have Ricardo Montalban extracting these little worm things off of a creature with tongs. And it looks very realistic, especially when you're a kid. And they could have just put them in these guys' ears. They're trying to basically torture these guys and get some answers from them, I believe. Instead of doing that, they just put the little slug things in these helmets and then put the helmets on the people. And those things right away found the ear holes of these guys and burrowed their way into their heads. I had a lot of earaches as a kid, and so I knew that pain, but I thought, man, how much worse is it to have these slugs in your ears with the little pinchers, basically, you know, eating into your brain. And they were using a lot of bizarre, you know, terminology that I didn't understand as a kid. So I asked my dad, like, what does it mean to wrap around somebody's cerebral cortex? I could barely pronounce it. My dad was just like, I think it just means they're eating the guy's brain. Number 7 is the face melting scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. That movie was actually made in 1981. I was surprised. I thought it was more like 83 or 84. But my sense of when movies were made are a little bit skewed because I always seem to think that they were made the year I saw them as a kid. Speaking of really well filmed scenes, this one probably takes the cake as far as, you know, visual effects for back then. I just couldn't believe how, I believe his name was Arnold Ernest Tote, how his face basically melted off without the use of a lot of special effects like CGI these days. And it wasn't just the melting part, it was the part right before it. You know, it's building up and all of a sudden he starts laughing very hideously. And his mouth opens up really wide and he's got already a pretty bizarre face. And then just to see his eyes roll up and his face melt off, and what I recall really being disturbed by besides that was that his skin turned bright white and dripped off like it was milk or something. So the next couple days eating breakfast with milk was a whole nother experience. Number 6 is one of the newest movies that are on this list. There's another one from the same year, 1987, and this one is Full Metal Jacket, directed by the late and great Stanley Kubrick, of course. So there were tons of scenes in this movie that are very memorable, and it wasn't until a lot of years later that I realized that that's where they sampled the 2 Live Crew song, which is called Me So Horny. They take that snippet from the movie and actually use it in the song. Just a little tidbit for you. Me so horny. Speaking of my stepdad who loved B movies, he rented this movie and he used to be in the military. You know, he was in the Marines. And he would verify that almost everything that he saw in this film was very realistic, or it was actually things that he experienced while he was in the service. During that scene where all the guys beat the guy with the soap in the socks, he said, yeah, that's something that, you know, would happen because if one person screwed up in the group, everybody had to pay the price. But of course, the scene that stuck with me the most was the one that involved a rifle and it's just crazy how it really seared into my mind. The look on Gomer Pyle's face, that's what they called him, his crazy eyes during this entire scene, the way his friend Joker was trying to talk him out of doing all this crazy stuff, and then the sergeant shows up, and I hate to say this, but the guy's standing there, Gomer Pyle with his rifle, and the drill sergeant, who was just a terror through the whole thing, didn't let up even then, and ended up paying the price for it. So that was pretty traumatic, seeing him take out his own drill sergeant, but then to turn it on to himself. It was just jolting how quickly it all went down. And the aftermath, the blood on the wall behind him, the way he looked just, after doing something like that, that is something that will not leave your mind no matter what age you're at when you see it. Number 5 is from one of my earliest memories of watching these terrifying movies from the early 80s. This one's from 1982. A lot of crazy movies came out in 81 and 82. This is The Beastmaster. And the creatures are called the Winged Devourers. Devourers? That's hard to say. Winged Devourers. But anyway, I don't recall too much about the entire film, but I will never forget the way these Winged Devourers would devour their prey, if you will, which were human beings. And what they would do is they had these wings. They had arms, but basically the wings would hang down like skin, and they would wrap somebody up and basically digest them. So that I believe they would secrete like an acid, maybe like the fly did, and they would dissolve within their wings, their skin wings, their skin curtains. Can I say that? Then they would jiggle them, and that was a really frightening thing to see. And then they would basically digest them. They would ingest them, whatever, melted, they would ingest. And all that was left were bone and armor, I believe. And they would just open their wings, and all that would just drop to the ground. It was such a brutal way to go. Every once in a while, my grandpa, who lived in a remote area in a trailer house, he eventually got a cabin. But he would be out of town, and my dad would take us kids up to his trailer, and we would just spend the night almost like we're staying at a hotel or something. Well, for some reason, I think he must have had the VHS, but we would always watch Psycho whenever we went there. And by the way, I'm talking about 1960s Psycho. Well, I just did a top 12 most beautiful Twilight Zone actresses video, and it got like no views, but that's okay. I had a lot of fun making it. I recommend checking it out, though, not just for the beauty, but for the tidbits of the Twilight Zone that I threw in there. I did a lot of research in making that video and found out some really interesting stuff. Anyhow, in that video, I showcased the naturally beautiful Vera Miles. And her role in the episode called Mirror Image is epic. Gotta check that out. But she also plays Lila Crane, Marion's sister, the lady from the shower scene in Psycho. She plays her sister in the original Psycho, and she's also in Psycho 2 as well. Well, in the original Psycho, the scene that really stuck with me is when she approaches, I'll call her Mother Bates or Mommy Bates, and she basically taps her on the shoulder, which somehow causes Mother Bates' head to spin around, revealing this skeleton corpse face with empty eye sockets and this huge toothy smile that's very decrepit looking. And of course, the music is just perfect for that scene. Bernard Herrmann is a genius. And they had this cool lighting effect because when Vera freaked out, she threw her hand back and hit the light bulb, which was swinging. And so when they went back to the face, you could see the eye socket shadows moving, and it gave it this really hideous effect. Just pure genius in movie making back then, doing so much with the little bit they had. Number 3 is not only another war movie, but it's also another brutal killing at the hands of what I would call a sociopath. And that is from the movie Platoon from 1986. A lot of big names in this movie, but the scene I'm going to talk about involves Charlie Sheen. And it's the scene where those two villagers are hiding in their hut. And Charlie Sheen is basically like, get out of there, and he's really mad because he just wants people to listen to him so he doesn't have to do anything, violent. So it's like a young guy, and I think it's his grandma or his mom, but they come out of this hole they're hiding in. And I just felt so tense as a kid watching this because I'm like, now what are they going to do? And this character named Bunny comes out. And he reminds me of that same bully jock energy that I felt so much when I was in school. But he comes up and he starts just, going off on these two people. And it's so sad because he knocks the kid down and he basically starts beating him with the butt of his rifle. And he only hits him a couple times, but then they show his reaction to it and everybody else's. They don't show the actual violence, which is genius because it makes you imagine the worst possible thing. Anyway, Bunny, he looks really amused at what he just did, whereas everybody else looks very sickened. And Bunny is just like, whoa, have you ever seen a head come apart like that? And then you look at the poor mom or grandma or whatever she was, and she can't even cry or react. She's just in a total state of shock, which to me is the most realistic take on that. War movies were always tough to watch, and I think that's a good thing, because if they just wanted to glamorize war, that would be, to me, just brainwashing everybody. So to show the dark side of what actually happens, I think is a very needed thing. Number 2 is from a pretty infamous VHS tape back in the day. People would rent it, they would dub a copy of it and give it to their friend or something. People loved to share the trauma back then. Well, it was the movie called Faces of Death, and it's from 1978. I didn't realize it was that old, actually. And it's basically like a snuff film. There's multiple death scenes in it. And when I was a kid, I thought it was all real. Later on, I would learn that it was, I think, fabricated. Half of it at least was, where it was actually done on like a set with multiple cameras and all that. But like I keep saying, when I was a kid, I didn't know any better. I thought it was all real life, or I should say real death in this case. So once again, my stepdad, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have seen half the stuff, but I have to thank him because it really made me grow up fast. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but well, the scene that really got me, along with several others, but this one stood up at the top, was the draw and quartering scene. And this one had to be fake now that I look back on it. There were multiple camera angles. There were close up on certain shots that really looked Hollywood now that I look back on it. But as a kid, watching a guy basically get, all of his limbs tied with ropes, and then those were attached to 4 different horses. And then they, I think, cracked a whip or something, and all the horses ran in different directions, basically pulling apart this guy. Anyhow, the part that really got to me was that they showed the torso of the guy just laying there afterwards, after all that just happened, and basically bleeding out. And I just kept looking at his face going, can he feel anything? Would you just bleed out right away and just go black? That's kind of what I was hoping for. But then I thought, man, what if he's just laying there suffering? So I tried to go to bed that night just laying there, and I just kept imagining what it must have felt like to have all 4 of your limbs just torn off by horses all at once, and then just to lay there and just fade out from there. What a way to go. Like I said earlier, this list is because of how I was affected by these scenes as a kid. When I look back now, my number 1 might seem a little bit silly, but it's RoboCop. And it's from 1987, and it's the scene where RoboCop gets his hand blown off. But at the time, he's not RoboCop. He's just a cop at this moment. So this is officially the newest film on my list because it was made July 17th of 87. Whereas I think Full Metal Jacket was July 10th of the same year. We didn't always just go to my grandpa's to get away as kids. My dad actually rented a legit hotel one time, and it was the Holiday Inn, and this is back when hotels were a lot more fun. They had like a theme going on this night, and it was a tropical theme. So they had these fake palm trees, and they gave us these leis to wear, and we have pictures of it. It's hilarious. Well, it was great because we got to order room service for the first time ever, and it was the best pizza of my life, I swear to God. To this day, I can still remember how good it was. But we also had cable television on 2 different televisions. There was one in the living room area and one in the bedroom. The one in the living room was playing RoboCop, and my dad's like, go ahead and watch it. I know it's rated R, but we're on vacation, have fun. I was excited because I just pictured RoboCop being like a superhero to me, like Batman or something. And as we watched it, it just got a little too real for us at the time. This guy named Clarence comes up, played by the dad from Dead Poets Society. Perfect casting for this. Goes up to Murphy, who's already laying there helpless, so it's a really scary feeling to watch this, and blows his hand off. And the scene just like jerked my heart out of my chest. I just couldn't believe the brutality happening in front of me. And the way Murphy just looked at his hand that wasn't there anymore, just a stump, that was a lot to take back then. And on top of that, the whole gang are just laughing and having a great time. So once again, that same theme of that sociopathic glee when doing the most brutal thing to somebody. That just really got to me and still does to this day. That's why I have a hard time watching movies like Hostel. Well, I watched the rest of the movie and at least he becomes RoboCop and starts kicking ass. That's a good thing. But I still had that lump in my throat from what I had witnessed earlier. And that stuck with me for a long time. Every time I thought of the movie, I would get that feeling of just dread inside of what I saw. But that same night, I ended up, saying, okay, I'm going to go check out the bedroom now. And I turned on the TV in there while everybody else stayed in the living room. And they were playing some adult movies. And I wasn't supposed to see them. And it was just a different time back then. It was just on the TV. And so besides watching a very traumatic, event happen to RoboCop, I also got to see a few things I wasn't supposed to see for quite a few years. So yeah, it was a very formative night at the hotel. That's all I gotta say. You can see why I'm so screwed up, I think. But anyway, thanks to the Holiday Inn for that. So let me know if any of these movies did any traumatic damage to your brain as well, or if there are some other scenes in these movies that I totally didn't mention or I forgot about, maybe on purpose, especially Faces of Death. So I'll be excited to read those in the comment section, and I'll see you at the next video. By the way, it's going to come out a lot quicker than this one did. Last night I had the inspiration. I was watching a really cool TV show from the 80s, and a really cool idea came to me. So I'm real excited about putting that one together for you. So we'll see you there. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.